All right, yeah, it's time to jump around as we get set for a brand new Major League Baseball season. Jeff Andreas with you. Bill Cowan off all of this week, but yeah, I'm excited to talk some baseball here. The Toronto Blue Jays are in Florida to take on the Tampa Bay Rays in their inaugural game of the year. That gets underway just after 1 o'clock, and you can hear it right here on Radio NL. The guy who's going to be making the call, Ben Shulman. Yeah, you can hear him on Radio NL Sportsnet. He's the radio play-by-play announcer for the Blue Jays, joining me now on the line. Ben, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm doing great. Really excited. We've waited a long time since the end of last year, so to get baseball back, it's my favorite day of the year, probably tied with like the last game of the year and the trade deadline.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun.
Absolutely, right? The season rings anew. All hopes are eternal here at this point in time. What's the weather like down in Florida today?
You'll actually catch me in Toronto, so not much.
Okay.
Not much warmer than I imagine it is in Kamloops, right around zero.
Okay, fair enough. All right, let's get into the game itself here. Obviously, the Jays are kind of starting off a little bit behind the eight ball, I would say, in terms of injuries, right? You got Kevin Gausman unable to start, closer Jordan Romano not able to, be available here in the opening couple of weeks. But of course, Jose Barrios, a guy that they've had a lot of faith in moving forward since making him one of the higher paid pitchers and higher paid guys on the staff. How are we feeling just about the pitching side of things right now as we head into a new season for the Jays? Because that was their big strength last year.
Yeah, in terms of the rotation, I think I'm personally feeling pretty good about it. It looks like Kevin Gausman will still be able to make the first turn, the first 5 starts, one of them. So I think at the end of the day, while it would be great to have him start opening day because that's something he's earned, if he starts game 5, it's something you forget about by 3 weeks into the season because everything gets jumbled up with off days and stuff like that. Anyway, definitely more concern for me comes in the bullpen. I still think they have good guys down there, but no team is going to be in a good spot when their 2 most reliable relievers start the year on the injured list. I mean, Jordan Romano's a back-to-back All-Star. He's on a path to, maybe challenge Eric Gagne or John Axford as the best Canadian closer that there's ever been. And he's a really, really good pitcher. And Eric Swanson was hugely important for the Blue Jays last year and would be the guy that would typically close if Romano wasn't available. So you knock those 2 guys off the bullpen for at least the first 12 days because they are on the 15-day IL, but it's backdated 3 days, all the administrative stuff that gets kind of boring when you get too much into the weeds of it. But, that's going to be big for them. They are going into the season relying a lot upon Jimmy Garcia, Chad Green, Tim Meza, all guys who have done it at a high level at the major league level, but not the guys they envision necessarily to close games or pitch in the 8th inning sometimes when they have a lead. And at the beginning of the year, usually you're not having your starters go 110 pitches, 100 pitches, because the building up process usually continues at least about a week or 2 into the season. So you're typically relying on your bullpen more than you usually are. And for the Blue Jays, that, is going to be interesting with those guys out. So I think with the rotation, I feel as confident as I usually would. Like you mentioned, Jose Barrios, is a guy that they have a lot of faith in, has been very good for the majority of his career. The one season was kind of a blip in an otherwise really steady career. And he's really good at getting right-handed hitters out, which the Rays are loaded with right-handed hitters right now. So I like him starting opening day. I think that was a good call by them overall. And we'll see what the bullpen can do. Jimmy Garcia looked great in the spring. Chad Green was working on some stuff, but he's back fully healthy, which is big. And if those guys can be locked down for 2 weeks, that's probably what you need until at least one of Romano or Swanson come back, then they're in a good spot. So I think that the rotation is set well, and they're going to rely upon their offense a lot, which they didn't do as much last year, but they need to do if they're going to get to where they need to go.
I want to get to the offense in a second, but I do want to ask about the potential X factor, I would say, on the pitching staff. At least, it feels like it should be the case, is Alek Manoah, right? A guy who was, starting in the All-Star game just a couple of seasons ago, and last season could not put it together, just was unable to, keep his stuff in line. Do you see a future here in 2024 where he could find himself back on the staff, whether it be in sort of a long reliever or back into a starter's role? I know it's really hard to predict, but, he had a bit of a rough spring as well. So I just don't know what the expectations should be. And if you're a Fairweather Blue Jay fan, there's probably a chance you think this guy has a chance to come back and really, be near the top of the rotation.
Yeah, I mean, I have as many questions about what he can be as you do, to be honest. It's hard to know because he came into the spring. Everyone comes in the best shape of their lives, but a noticeable difference, I think, for Alek Manoah in the way that he looked and the way that, he was just on the mound and his confidence. And then we only saw one outing, which you can look at the numbers, was not a strong outing overall. And then we didn't see him again because he had to deal with some shoulder soreness. So we really didn't see him off the mound again until the end of spring and didn't see him in a game against opposing hitters at all. So it'll be interesting. I would bet, like you said, will he contribute at some point this year? I would bet that Alek Manoah is on the roster at some point this year because the Blue Jays had about as clean of a bill of health with their rotation as they could have last year. It's just unrealistic, I think, for them to do that again. It's possible, but I would guess that at some point this year, they'll need to reach for starter 6 or starter 7. Not saying that he is that. He's just not in the rotation right now because he's not healthy. But, whether it's a guy's not working out very well at the start of the year or someone needs some time off because of an injury or something else, I bet that at some point he pitches his way back onto the roster. They still really have a lot of confidence in Manoah. There aren't many guys that can put together a top 3 Cy Young season, and he did that, like you said, just 2 years ago. So the ceiling is so high. I think that he'll, continue to build up, whether that's in Florida or, get some time on rehab assignments in the minor leagues as well. And they still view him, they said, as a starter. So you never have too many starters. You never have too many pitchers. I would bet, but again, I have a lot of questions like you do, but I would bet at some point we see Manoah on the mound in a Blue Jays uniform this year.
Yeah, and you mentioned sort of the luck they had last year. The one thing I remember was, I can't remember who it was who kind of got injured, but then all of a sudden you had Hyunjin Ryu just ready to step right in. You're not going to have that luxury here in 2024. All right, let's go to the offense here with Ben Shulman, voice of the Blue Jays here. They didn't look great on the bats last year, and I think there's a lot of just expectation that you'll see some internal growth here, right? A better season from Vladdy, maybe a better season from George Springer. He got a lot of good things going last year as they moved him to the corner of the outfield, able to stay quite a bit healthier compared to what he normally is. Alejandro Kirk, of course, didn't have a great year after being an all-star the season before. Dalton Varsho, a rough first season behind the plate for the Jays in his inaugural season. I mean, do you see this team really having a huge improvement on last year? I have a strong feeling they'll be better than last year on the bats. I just don't know how much better we can really expect them to be, though.
Yeah, it is hard to know. I think that, especially Vlad, I'm expecting a better season. And, who knows what my expectations are worth. But I would expect a better season from Vlad. I think he's looked a lot better. Last year happened to be, really the worst season for him in a lot of numbers since his rookie year. And I think that more than likely he turns that around. How much does he? Does he turn 26 into 30 homers? Does he turn it into 35? Does he turn it into 40? That could be a big deal for the Blue Jays. And does he hit 280 instead of 260 or something like that? That's a big deal for them. I love the springs that we saw out of Springer, Varsho, and Kirk. I think that spring can only go so far a lot of the time. Game planning is really different. You face minor leaguers sometimes. So, again, it's hard to know how much that means. But I would think that there'll be some internal improvements from a lot of those guys. I don't necessarily think that they need those guys to all have career years. If each of them is 5% better, and this is bad math, this is why I do baseball and not like rocket science, but if each of them is 5% better, maybe the team's 20% better overall between those 4 guys, and they might not be the 2021 Blue Jays who were essentially the best offense in baseball, or 2022 who I believe led baseball in home runs and were right up there. But if they can go from being 14th in runs scored to eighth in runs scored, they're a much better pitching and defense team than they were a couple of years ago. They might not have to be the best offensive team in baseball, but if they can be one of the better teams, at least in that top 10, I think that'll do a lot for them. So I like the idea of internal improvements. I also really think that the Justin Turner ad could do a lot for them. There's a general skepticism when a guy is 39 years old, and I understand that, and I would feel some of that too. But at the same time, he was great when he was 38, and he was great when he was 37, and he's one of these guys who took a while and then figured it out in his 30s, kind of like a Jose Bautista. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's a big possibility that he makes a big impact. He's more than likely, health permitting, going to play a lot more games than Brandon Belt did, who played 103 games and was a bit more of a platoon guy because they wouldn't face him against lefties. Turner's going to go up against everyone, and even I think play a little bit of defense for the Blue Jays to keep him in the lineup as well when other guys have to DH. So I think that there's a chance here that they are an improved offensive team. I really like with their ads in Turner and IKF and the approach changes in some guys that they're going to make more contact. I think they're not necessarily the same mold again as those teams that homered all the time, and that was the big deal. They do need to hit more homers, but I think this team is not going to strike out very much at all. I think they're going to put pressure on other defenses, and I think defense has been undervalued a lot around Major League Baseball the last couple of years. Teams tend to go for offense first options and a little bit put defense to the side and just figure it out. And I think a team like the Blue Jays that's not going to strike out a ton could really make teams pay for decisions like that when they have guys playing a little bit out of position because of their bats and playing in uncomfortable spots. The Blue Jays could make them pay for that overall.
Yeah, I was going to ask a little bit about Justin Turner because I really like him as opposed to Brandon Belt. I was never really a fan of the Belt signing. But, Turner, I think, is a little bit difficult one to read given the fact that Shohei Ohtani was obviously the big prize. You didn't get it. And Justin Turner kind of being the backup plan. It's just not quite as sexy. As much as I love Justin Turner, I've been a fan of him for a long time. It's still, obviously not quite the same level of player you were hoping to get, at least in terms of the buzz that the team was getting. All right, final question for you, because I do want to let you go, but we are, of course, going to get the crystal ball out here and see what the predictions might look like when it comes to the AL East. It's still, I think, the toughest division in baseball. Tampa Bay, obviously, it continues. Doesn't matter how good their roster looks on paper. They just seem to be a great organization and are able to put things together. Baltimore, as we all know, is very much on the up and up. Juan Soto going to the Yankees. That team should be improved, although, of course, they have pitching health of their own, and Aaron Judge is already dealing with some stuff. But what do you think the Jays' kind of odds are of being a playoff team once again this year? I imagine they're pretty good, but the competition's pretty darn good as well.
Yeah, it's so tough, and I'll apologize if in a week someone asks me this and my predictions are different because I'm not a good preseason predictions guy. I'm very wrong a lot of the time. But I would say that the Blue Jays, have a lot of the, at least like computers and models say that they have an above 50% chance. I would agree with that. I lean that the Blue Jays will make the playoffs this year. It's a very tough American League and even tougher AL East, but I still think they outpitch every team in the division right now. There's always that race factor, like you mentioned. Really, who knows what they're going to do? But I think they outpitch every team in the division. And if they get that, even marginal offensive improvement that I was talking about, I think they have a good shot to at least win high 80s games, if not dip into the 90s again. So I at this moment in time, think that the Blue Jays will, make the playoffs. If they start 2-8, don't hold me to that, but I would be more confident than not that they'll be a playoff team this year.
All right. Well, I hope we get a chance to check in with you at some point throughout the season. I really do appreciate you joining us here on opening day. It's a great day. I'm so excited, and I'm definitely going to be tuned in here to hear you with the call later on this afternoon. Thanks so much for doing this, Ben, and happy opening day.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Happy opening day to you too.